C. So this week we're kind of looking at the hips, and more or less what we're doing is a combination of the 2 weeks that we've already done. So kind of putting those two things together and starting to see how connected the hips and the core are, and the thing that's between the hips and the core is the pelvis. And so today we're going to look at kind of a mobility relationship that happens in the pelvis, and that is the hip joint. And the hip joint is a ball and socket joint. So the head of the leg bone, so the top leg bone, it's called the femur. So if I say head of the femur, you'll know what I'm talking about. The head of the bone, and then the head of the femur is round, and it sits in the hip socket, and it can move in all directions. So most of the cueing that I do today is going to be kind of revolved around that ball and socket joint. So as a ball and socket joint, you can get all kinds of movements. You can get flexion and extension, and you can get rotation, and then you can get abduction and adduction. So all of those movements happen, and just kind of this awareness of what it feels like to keep your awareness in the hip joint. And I'll keep bringing you back to it, as you're probably getting used to. I keep bringing you back to a specific cue. So today's is the hip socket and that rotation of the head of the femur in the hip socket. So if you have a belt, have it close by. I can also cue without the belt. And if you have the blocks, have those close by as well. And we're going to start, as we often do, lying on our backs. So start with the knees bent, feet mat distance apart, and allow the legs to fall in together. And as they fall in together, just notice what it feels like in the hip socket for the legs to rest together. And then shifting to make sure that you feel an even amount of weight on either side of your hips, your pelvis, and shifting to make sure that you feel an even amount of weight on your shoulder blades. And bring your right hand to your belly and your left hand to your heart. Close your eyes if they're not already closed. And allow yourself a moment to arrive into this space, to this time, this moment. And allowing the sense of heaviness of the back of your hips, the backs of your shoulder blades, connecting to the earth. Relaxing any tension or gripping you feel in your jaw, in your tongue, in your neck. Just allow yourself to become aware of your breath. With your hands resting on your belly and your chest, just noticing the rise and fall of the breath beneath the hands. Noticing the quality of your breath. Are your inhalations and exhalations complete? Are you cutting them off to gasp for that next portion of the breath? And wherever you are, exhale your breath completely out. As you inhale, fill up your belly first. Allow the breath to travel to the sides of your rib cage and ending at the top of your chest. And then open your mouth to exhale the breath out forcefully. So sighing deeply. And again, fill up belly, sides of the ribs, top of the chest. And at the top of the breath, open the mouth, and again, exhale out forcefully. So sighing loud. Feeling that slight tone at the back of the throat as you do that. And then inhale again, filling belly, sides of the rib cage, top of the chest. This time holding at the top of your breath. Taking in an extra sip of breath. This time as you exhale, start with your mouth open, feel the tone of your back throat, and at the halfway point, close your mouth, continue to exhale with that tone at the back of the throat. And then inhale for a count of 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep the tone at the back of the throat, mouth closed, exhale 4, 3, 2, 1. Keep the tone, inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep that constriction, 4, 3, 2, 1. So continue this. Equal parts breath, some of breathe deep. And each time you inhale and exhale, keeping that slight awareness of the back of your throat being constricted or toned. And as you do that, hearing the breath, the oceanic sound of the breath between the ears. This is Ujjayi breath. Oftentimes, as we move through a practice, we can use the sound of the breath to bring our awareness back, to make sure that we're breathing. You can also see that there is that slight toning of your belly also as you exhale. And release the hands down beside the body. Walk the feet towards the center of the mat so that your feet are hip distance apart. And bend your right knee towards your chest. Intertwine your fingers in front of the shin and just start by pulling the knee towards the chest to the point where you can comfortably. Noticing any tension or gripping you feel around the muscles, around the bones. See if you can consciously allow them to soften. Sometimes it's easier to keep the left knee bent. Sometimes it feels better to extend the leg long, so make that decision. And then as you inhale, push your shin into your hands, allowing your elbows to straighten. And as you exhale, bend the elbows out to the side and draw the knee in towards your chest. Inhale, push knee into hands, straighten the elbows. And exhale, bend the elbows out to the side, drawing knee towards chest. So just continue to move with this flexion movement. Exhaling, Ujjayi, to draw the knee in towards the chest. And inhaling to push away. And as you're moving, notice what you feel where the top of the leg bone connects into the hip socket. It's almost as if the head of the femur is pushing towards the back of the pelvis as you exhale, and shifting towards the front of the pelvis as you inhale. It's not almost as if, that is what it's doing. And then continue to hold your right knee with your right hand and take your left hand into your left hip point. We're going to start to make circles with the right leg. So just start with your awareness kind of guiding your knee in circles. And just notice what it feels like as you're kind of steering it. And then shift your awareness so that you feel this movement in the hip socket itself. So where the leg bone, top of the leg bone, rotates inside the hip socket. Just become aware of it. Notice where it moves easily, where it doesn't move so easily, and then shift directions, so going in the opposite way. And noticing if anything feels different in this direction. Still shifting from the knee, guiding, steering, and then the actual movement happening in the hip socket. And draw the knee back towards the chest. Grab the knee with both hands. Bend the left knee if it's straight and bring the left foot back to the floor. Grab your right foot, the outer edge of your right foot with your left hand as you flex your right ankle strongly. Take your right hand and push your knee open. So we're taking the hip into external rotation. So push with your right hand inside your inner right knee and pull with your left hand with your right ankle flexed. Notice where you feel the rotation in the hip socket. Notice any areas where you feel resistance, where you're holding on unintentionally. And take your right hand and switch your right hand with your left hand with your right hand. So grab the outer edge of your right foot with your right hand. Keep flexing the ankle strongly. And then press your left foot into the ground to lift your left hip off the ground, to twist, to take your right thigh to the floor. So you're gonna allow your left hip to come off the floor enough to bring the front of the right thigh to the floor. Then look at your right knee and make sure it's bent 90 degrees. See if you can pull your foot closer to your chest, keeping the foot strongly flexed. You're gonna pull with your fingers as you push the edge of your foot into your fingers. Notice how that deepens the rotation in the hip socket. Then continue to hold on to the right foot with the right hand. Straighten the left leg. Now your left hip will come back to the floor. The right knee will come off the ground. Allow that to happen, but see if you can continue to create that external rotation in the hip. Relax your jaw, relax your tongue, lift your head and chest off the floor and look towards your left foot. Then release your right foot and hover your left foot off the ground as you reach your hands toward your left foot. A little core action here. The head and chest is off the floor. You're reaching towards your left foot. Left foot is off the ground. Right knee still pushing out an external rotation. Release both feet to the floor, head to the ground. Step your feet wide, mat distance apart, arms wide, T to the body. And again, just drop the knees side to side. I don't know why I said again, because this is the first time we've done it. But notice the difference between your right and left hip socket as you do this. And come back to center. Keep your right foot on the floor. Bend your left knee towards your chest, intertwining your fingers together. Start to pull the knee towards the chest, stopping where you feel resistance. And just see if you can soften into that resistance instead of resisting it. And then decide if it's more comfortable for you to have your right leg bent or straight. As you inhale, press your shin into your hands, allow your elbows to straighten. As you exhale, draw your knees towards your chest as the elbows bend out to the side. And then again, start to move with your breath. So as you inhale, Ujjayi, slight tone, straighten the elbows, press knee, and as you exhale, pull the knee towards the chest. And instead of just like doing this aimlessly, really focus on what you're feeling in the hip socket. Notice where you feel resistance, where you feel ease. And it's different for everyone. I feel more resistance on the front of my hip when I do this. Some people may find it at the hamstring attachment. Some people may find it on the side of their hip. So just notice if you feel resistance where. And release the right hand down beside your body. Use your left hand to start to guide your knee in 2 circles. So first, feel like what it feels like to have the awareness on the hand and the knee. And then shift awareness into the hip socket itself. Switching directions. Kind of making note of which direction had more movement, which direction you have to think a little bit more about. Like, these are all things that tells us about our body. Come back, hug knee to chest. Bend your right knee, bring the right foot back to the floor, heel in line with your sit bone. And then take your right hand and grab the outer edge of your left foot, pulling the heel towards you. Take your left hand inside your left knee and press the knee open as much as you can. Pausing to feel resistance. Noticing if you can soften into that resistance. And then switch hands. So left hand grabs the outer edge of the left foot. Ankle is flexed strongly, so that stacks the ankle joint. Then press your right foot into the floor to start to lean to the left. So right hip comes off the floor. Front of the left thigh comes to the floor. Make sure that your knee is bent to 90 degrees. And then start to pull your hand into your foot as you push the edge of your foot into your hand. See if you can go more into external rotation. So as you create that awareness of the hand and foot together, can you push the knee further out? And slowly rock back onto your right hip. The left knee will come off the floor. Straighten your right leg to the ground. Find external rotation. So find the leg bone rotating in the hip socket. Lift the head and the chest off the floor. Look towards your right foot. Release your left foot. Reach both hands towards your right foot. Right foot hovers 6 inches off the floor or thereabouts. Keep trying to externally rotate. So taking the sole of the foot closer to your head. The knee further away from your head. Release both feet to the ground, head to the ground, feet wide, arms wide. And then again, now the again makes sense. Windshield wiper, knees side to side. And notice the movement inside the hip socket. Roll to either side and use your hands to press up, keeping the head heavy until you're all the way up. We're going to come into hands and knees. Start with the wrist aligned with the front edge of your mat, shoulders above your wrists, knees below your hips. And just start to move through cat and cow. So as you inhale, lift your head, lift your chest. As you exhale, press hands and feet into the floor and round through your spine. And then start to move your own movement to your own breath. You can use that Ujjayi breath, the slight tone at the back of the throat so you can hear the breath as you move. And let the breath be your guide as you transition between one and the other. So when we first start to do cat and cow, it's automatic. We feel the movement in our spine. What happens if you shift your awareness to the pelvis and how it rotates on the head of the femurs now? So when we were lying on our backs, we were rotating the heads of the femurs inside the hip sockets. And now we're rotating the hip sockets on top of the leg bones. So just kind of recognize that awareness, that shift of awareness. And come into a neutral spine. Keep your left hand on the floor. Bring your right hand to the back of your head. And if it's ever too much on your wrist, you can come down onto your left elbow. Bring your right hand to the back of your head. Try to keep your pelvis in neutral. So stack the hip sockets on top of the leg bones. As you inhale, lift your elbow up towards the sky. As you exhale, rotate and touch your left forearm with your right elbow. Inhale, rotate open. And then exhale, twist and touch. So again, start to move with Ujjayi breath. And once you have the movement pretty good, Shift your awareness to your pelvis again and notate if you feel much movement in the pelvis. Can you allow the back of the pelvis to rest right on top of the hip points and keep that movement minimal? Inhale, lift the elbow, reach the hand up, and then lower the right hand to the ground. Switch, so weight on the right hand, back of the left hand to the back of the head. Shift so that you feel an even amount of weight on either side of the hips. As you exhale, twist, take left elbow to right forearm, and as you inhale, rotate open. So again, finding this movement, exhaling to twist in, inhaling to rotate open. So we're noticing that most of the movement, when we keep our pelvis kind of squared, is in the thoracic spine, that mid-spine, kind of around the rib cage area. And there is a little shift side to side with the weight on knee to knee, but can you minimize it by keeping your awareness in the hip socket? Inhale, open. As you exhale, bring both hands to the floor. Toes together, knees wide, sit your hips back towards your heels. And rest your forehead on the floor in child's pose. And see if you can feel that awareness in child's pose. Reach the arms forward. So walk the fingers as far towards the front edge of your mat as you can. And when you can't anymore, see if you can crawl your fingers a little further forward, feeling the side body stretch. Keep reaching the hips back. Keep your hands where they are, knees where they are. Shift forward into tabletop. Keep your left hand where it is. If you have a block, take your right hand, grab your block and place it between your thighs. We did this last time. And place the block as high up your inner thighs as you can. Start to squeeze the block with your inner thighs. And then see if you can rotate your pelvis forward so that the hip points point straight down. Tuck the toes under. Lift the knees off the floor. Press the hips back, deepening the hip creases. Press the heads of the femurs straight to the wall behind you. And then straighten your legs. So downward facing dog. Drop the knees to the floor. Tabletop. Squeeze the block. Start to press the leg bones straight back. Lift the knees. Exhale. Lift the knees back into downward facing dog. So we're going to start to move with this with the breath. So inhale, drop the knees back to the floor. Exhale, squeeze the block and press back to downward facing dog. So just keep doing this with your breath. Inhaling to knees, exhaling to down dog. And start to notice, can you bring that awareness? So when you press back to down dog, that the hip sockets rotate forward and the leg bones rotate back. You start to find that awareness of where forward folds hinge from the hips rather than the waist. The next time you come to downward facing dog, start to bend your knees and walk your hands to the back of your mat. So you can keep your knees bent. Press the knees forward as you press the leg bones, the top of the head, the femurs way back. And press the pelvis towards your thighs, so the points of your pelvis towards your thighs. Inhale, bring your hands to your shins. See if you can start to straighten your knees by pressing the leg bones back. Exhale, keep your legs as straight as you can. You can bend as you needed. And rotate the head of the pelvis over the heads of the femurs. Inhale, rotate the pelvis back to lift up. Exhale, hands to heart. Squeeze the block between your thighs. Inhale, reach your arms over your head. Bending your knees slightly. Hinge your hips. Rotating the pelvis on the tops of the leg bones to come back to the forward fold. Inhale, hands to shins. Firm the front of the thighs. Press the leg bones back. Lift the pelvis slightly. Exhale, rotate the pelvis over the heads of the femurs. Rotate down. Keep the legs strong. Inhale, lift up by rotating the pelvis up. Exhale, hands to heart center. Squeeze the block. Inhale, reach the arms over your head. Exhale, bending the knees just slightly. Rotate the pelvis over the heads of the femurs. Forward fold. Inhale, firm the thighs. Press the leg bones back as you lift the pelvis slightly, halfway up. Exhale, hands to the floor. Grab your opposite elbow with your hands. Squeeze the block. Press the leg bones back. Rotate the pelvis further forward. And breathe. So hopefully starting to feel this connection. Release the arms. Walk the hands to the front of the mat, back into downward facing dog. Spread the fingers wide. Press the thighs into the blocks. Press the front of the leg bones back. Rotate the pelvis over the heads of the femurs. Bend the knees to the floor and release the block. Bend the knees wide, toes together, sit back. Again into child's pose. Just kind of each time you're coming into child's pose, noticing what you feel. This is a very deep rotation. Anterior, so forward rotation of the pelvis and the leg bones pushing way back. So just kind of noticing how that feels. Walk your fingers forward, pull the hips back. Inhale, shift forward to tabletop. And step your right foot up between your hands. Take your left foot towards the right side of your mat and walk your hands towards the left side of your mat. And then lift up. So you're gonna see a lot of things we repeat over and over again. I feel like that's a good way to learn things. So your right knee is directly below your right hip, or your left knee is directly below your left hip. And your right knee is directly over your ankle joint. Take your right thumb into your hip crease and pull it down. And feel that rotation of the leg bone into your hip socket. So as you pull it down, almost twist the thigh back as well. Take your left hand or right hand to the behind your right knee, so to the outside of your right knee, and push out. And at the same time, can you feel that rotation? It's almost as if the leg bone is sucking into the hip socket. Keep pushing the knee into the hand, hand into the knee, left hand on your hip, inhale. As you exhale, just bend the knee out to the side. Only go as far as you can. Inhale up. Exhale, bend the knee. So when we first start to move, we think of bending the knee. So just keep going. And as you bend the knee, can you switch your awareness more into the hip socket? So as you bend the knee out to the side, notice, can you keep it deep in your hip socket? Or do you feel like that hip pops out? Inhale back up. Release hands to hip. Bring the hands on either side of your right foot as you take your left foot to the back of the mat. Then come up again to your right knee. Take your right thumb into your hip crease, roll the leg bone into the hip socket and imagine kind of sucking it in there, so pulling the leg bone back. Then bring your hands to your hips. Keep your shoulders stacked above your hips. Inhale. As you exhale, bend deep. So again, first we just start thinking about the knee. We notice if the knee wants to tease in or out, and we try to track it right between the second and third toe. And once we have the awareness there, can we shift our awareness into the hip socket? And notice if we're like resisting something in the hip socket. Can we go a little less deep? Can we move beyond those barriers? The next time you bend deep, stay deep, and bring your hands to the floor, or if you have two blocks, you can bring your hands to the blocks on either side of your feet, right foot. Shift your left hip back so that your left hip is directly above your knee. Walk the blocks back further as you straighten your left leg, or right leg. Toes point straight up and pull towards your right shin. Push the leg bone into the hip socket and suck it in. And just notice how that gives you more space in your spine. Front of the thigh muscle is strong. Inhale here. As you exhale, bring the leg bone deep into the hip socket, pressing the back of the thigh towards the floor. And just don't force anything, but notice how you can ease forward, having respect for your tight hamstrings, your body, but notice the more awareness you bring into taking the leg into the hip socket, you usually get a little further than you normally can. Start to bend the knees. Bring the hands on either side of your right foot. Tuck the left toes under. Lift the back knee. And step back in a downward facing dog. So I love down dog here because you can really feel the difference. So firm the front of the thighs. Press the leg bones deep into the hip socket and rotate the pelvis forward. And notice if you feel a difference between the right and left side. Shift forward to tabletop. Bring your left foot up between your hands. Turn your right foot towards the left side of your mat. Hands walk towards the right side of your mat. And then lift up. Position hip above knee. Left knee above left ankle. Notice if your knee teases in or out. And then take your hand into the hip socket and roll your leg bone into your hip socket so that you can bring your knee into neutral, which is pointing between second and third toe. And keep your hands on your hips. And start to exhale, lunging to the side and inhaling up. And just start to think first of bending the knee and the direction of your second and third toe. And bring your left hand outside of your knee and keep that pushing into your hand as you continue to move. And shift your awareness into the hip socket. Where does the leg bone go to deepen into that flexion and abduction and external rotation? And come up. Turn towards your left foot, bringing the hands on either side of your left foot to reposition yourself. And then walk your hands again up to your left knee. Bring your left thumb into your hip crease to roll the leg bone out and then suck the leg bone into the hip socket. Hands to the hips, keep pulling down on the left hip and start to bend in and out. Noticing first where the knee wants to go and what you need to do to keep it into that second and third toe alignment. And once you have that going, transition your awareness into your hip socket and feel it deepening, pushing the leg bone back and down as you deepen. And as you come out, feeling it rotate up and forward. Take your blocks on either side of your foot as you bend deep into your front hip socket. And start to shift the hips back so that your right hip is above your right knee, and walk your left foot forward. Flex your ankle, taking your toes towards your shin. As you do that, feel the front of your thigh muscle engage. And then think of sucking the leg bone into the hip socket and pushing the leg bone towards the floor. Feel that ground the femur into the hip socket. Inhale. As you exhale, rotate the pelvis forward to bring your head and chest closer towards your front leg. And then pause to feel where you're holding on that's unnecessary. Soften where you can. Stay strong where you need strength. Usually that's the quad. The more the front of the thigh is engaged, the more the hamstring will actually lengthen. Slowly start to bend the left knee, bring the foot back to the floor. Hands on either side of the left foot, tuck the right toe under, lift the back knee, and again, step back into downward facing dog. Firm the front of the thighs, so engage the quads. Use that engagement to push the leg bones back, grounding the head of the femurs deep to the back of the hip socket and rotating the pelvis forward. Slight bend of the knees. Walk your hands to the back of your mat. Inhale, try to straighten your legs, bringing your hands to your shins. Firm the front of the thigh muscles, the quads, press the leg bones back. Reach head and chest forward, find length in the front of the spine. As you exhale, rotate the pelvis over the heads of the femurs to come into a forward fold. Fingertips into the hip creases, point the elbows up towards the sky. Keep the legs strong. Look forward and then lift up. Feel the pelvis rotate up to stand up. Good. Come to the center of your mat or face me. Doesn't really matter where you are, just face me. Outer edges of your feet parallel. Hands to your hips. Use your fingertips to find the hip points, the bones at the front of your pelvis. Shift your weight onto your right foot and tilt your pelvis up slightly. So we did this. Take your ribs to your hips and your hips to your ribs, so find the core. Shift the weight into your right foot without taking the hip out. So squeeze the right glute and lift the left knee straight forward. So think of the leg bone sucking into the hip socket. So taking it deep in. And then rotate the leg out. Try to keep the pelvis aligned. Notice if the left hip lift up, try to bring it back down. And take your left hand, place your foot inside your inner right thigh. Press foot into thigh. Thigh into foot. Hip points facing forward. And see how far you can go in external rotation without moving your hip points. So the knees pressing down and out. Tailbone is reaching down. Ribs are drawing down. Bring the knee forward and down. Shift onto your left foot. Notice if that hip pops out, draw it back in, bring the hip points into alignment. Lift the right knee forward and then suck the leg bone into the hip socket. Pause here. Notice if the right hip wants to lift higher and see if you can balance that out. And then open without moving the hip points. Take your right foot, place it inside your inner left thigh, calf, or ankle. Realign your hip points. And keeping them facing straight forward, see how much external rotation you can get in your right knee. So pushing it down and out to the side. Tailbone reaches down, ribs and hips draw in towards each other. Keep your pelvis in neutral, bring the knee forward and down. Come to the front of your mat. Outer edges of your feet parallel. Your feet can be up to hip distance apart. Firm the front of your thighs and feel the leg bones, the inner leg bones press back slightly. Inhale, reach your arms over your head. Keeping your knees straight as you can bend them, but see if you can rotate the pelvis over the heads of the femurs to fold. Inhale, hands to shins, press them towards each other to lift up halfway. Try to bring the pelvis into some form of hips and ribs towards each other. As you exhale, hinge forward. Bring the hands on either side of your feet. Bend your knees, reach your leg bones back. And step your left foot to the back of your mat. Right knee will stay directly above your right ankle joint. Deepen into your hip crease. So try to suck the head of the femur deep into the hip socket. And rotate your left heel down and in. If you look at your right heel, it will align with your left heel. So make any adjustments. And then again, draw the leg bone deep into the hip socket. Lift up to your knee. And then lift all the way up. Rotate your chest towards the long edge of your mat and bring your hands to your pelvis. As you inhale, straighten the right leg. As you exhale, bend the knee. So again, we're going to go through these same movements. Start with your awareness of your knee aiming between the second and third toe. And then once you notice, my knee wants to go in and I have to work really hard to take it out, or vice versa, start to shift your awareness into your hip socket. And feel the leg bone deep push back and suck in as you go down and up. Next time you come down, hold. Take your hand to the outside of your knee, press, and think of sucking your leg bone into the hip socket. Back leg is strong, arms out to the side, so warrior two. Look out over your right fingertips. Press your right foot into the floor, straighten your right leg. Firm the front of your thigh, press the leg bone back, and start to feel the hinging of your pelvis over your right leg. You can add a slight bend to your right knee. Hand to your shin. Left hand comes underneath, grabs your ribs, and rotates towards the sky. Left hand reaches up. Firm the front of your right thigh. See if you can find more awareness of rotating the leg bone in the hip socket to find a deeper external rotation. Look down at the right foot, bend the right knee. Notice the tendency to lose that external rotation and come out of it again. And then this time, can you bend the knee with more of that awareness in the hip? Maybe taking elbow to the right knee. Look back at your left hand as you take the palm up towards the sky, and then bicep to ear. So as you rotate the knee out, you feel the outer right hip hug in to create that external rotation. Left hand comes to the hip. Look down at your right foot. Both hands on either side of your right foot come onto your back toes and step to the front of your mat into a forward fold. Inhale, halfway lift. Firm the front of the thighs, press them back. As you exhale, hinge. Pelvis over, hip points. And breathe. Inhale, halfway lift. As you exhale, fold and step your right foot to the back of the mat. Bend the left knee deeply and ground the head of the femur into the hip socket. Rotate your right heel down and in and find heel to heel alignment. Lift up onto your left knee. Take the leg bone deep into the hip socket, so draw it back, pressing the thigh bone towards the floor, and then rotate the arms up and over to Virabhadrasana 2. Bring your hands to your hips. As you inhale, straighten the knee, and as you exhale, bend. Start to test out the movement. So the pelvis doesn't move much. The knee bends towards the second and third toe. But the real challenge is to feel that rotation of the leg bone in the hip socket to push the knee out and to flex the hip. Next time you come down, stay down. Tailbone towards the floor, knee pressing out, arms out to the side. Look out over your left hand. So warrior 2. See if you can find more of that external rotation in the hip socket itself, which takes the knee out and the outer hip in. Reverse your warrior. Straighten your right leg. Start to press the back of the leg bone towards the floor as you rotate the pelvis over your right thigh, left thigh. Hand comes to the shin. Right hand comes to the ribs, rotate the ribs up, and then lift. Right wrist above right shoulder. Move your awareness into your hip socket. As you turn the knee out, feel the head of the femur ground and rotate into the hip socket. Look down at the left foot. Keep the hip socket grounded as you bend the knee above the ankle joint and perhaps take your elbow up to your left knee. Reach the right hand back, look towards the right hand, and then reach your bicep to your ear. Keep pushing the knee out. Keep pressing the inner thigh forward. And it does the same action. Create that external rotation. Look down at your left foot. Bring both hands on either side of your left foot. This time, press back to downward facing dog. Firm the front of the thighs, press the thigh bones back, rotate the pelvis forward. Come down onto your knees. Have your blocks, if you have them, on either side. Step your right foot up between your hands, or up between the blocks. Tuck the back toe under and lift the back knee. Deepen the front hip crease and then rotate your left heel down and in. So again, finding that heel to heel alignment. Right thigh is parallel to the floor, so if you need to walk the foot forward or back, do so. Ground the head of the femur into the hip socket and then lift up, warrior 1. So rotate the ribs towards the wall in front of your knee. Pull the leg bone into the hip socket as you push the knee towards the pinky edge of your foot, which aligns the center of your kneecap to the second and third toe. Straighten your leg, bend it. Straighten your leg, bend it. See if you can find it first in your knee and then in your hip socket. Straighten your knee, hands to your hips. Step your left foot forward quite a bit. Enough so that you can bring your left heel to the ground and square your hips forward. So towards the front edge of your mat. So that might be quite a narrow stance. And it might be that you have to step your left foot wider so that your feet are actually hip distance apart. I'm going to face you for this so that you can see what I'm doing. But your blocks are still on either side. So take your right hand into your hip crease and pull the hip crease back, reach your left arm up. So imagine that your hips are gonna pinch your fingertips and come halfway. You don't even have to come halfway. Come as far forward as you can, keeping your hips squared and your legs straight. See if you can find that awareness of the right hip socket rotating over your right head of your femur. Next time you come down, maybe you have to bend your knees to bring your arms or your hands to the blocks. And then if your knee is bent, can you find the top of the leg bone in the hip socket, push it back, and firm the front of the thigh towards working towards straight legs. Both legs are straight. Both thighs are firm. Slight bend of your right knee and lift all the way up. Reach the arms over your head. Firm the front of your thighs, hinge forward, keeping your knees as straight as you can, but bent knees is fine. But I want you to feel more of that rotation. And the straighter the knees are, the more you find that. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, step down to tabletop. Lift up onto your blocks. Step your left foot up between your hands. Tuck your right toes under, lift your back knee. Rotate your left heel down and in, starting with heel to heel alignment. Pull the left leg bone deep into the hip socket, left knee above the ankle joint. Come up to the knee, draw the leg bone back, and then arms over the head. So warrior two. Inhale, straighten the left leg. As you exhale, start to bend. So feeling first, the bending of the knee, and then moving your awareness into your hip socket to see if you can find more of that tracking of the knee in the midline. Come up. I'm going to turn to face you. Step your right foot up as much as you need to square the hips straight forward. Your feet can be hip distance apart. Left fingertips in your hip crease, right arm up. Inhale, keep both legs straight, so firm the front of the thigh. Leg bone pushes back as you hinge forward. Only go as far forward as you can. Feeling the rotation of the pelvis over the leg bone and the ability to lift back up. Next time you come down, bring the hands to the blocks. Pull the leg bone deep back into the hip socket and rotate the pelvis over the front of the femur. Slight bend in the knees, lift all the way back up. Shake out your legs. Inhale, reach your arms up and over your head. So last time. Firm the front of your thighs, push the leg bones back as you hinge the pelvis over the leg bones to come into a forward fold. Inhale, halfway lift. As you exhale, lower down into your knees. Big toes touch, knees slightly wider than hips. Pause before you go back to child's pose. Look forward. See if you can hinge the pelvis further forward. And then send your hips back. Keep looking forward, walk the hands forward. Then lower the forehead to the floor to child's pose. Slowly lift forward into tabletop. Cross the ankles. We have time for one bridge pose. To move the hips in the opposite direction, we've been working kind of an external rotation and flexion. So this is internal rotation and extension. So heels in line with your sit bones. Hands beside your hips, palms facing down. Press the palms into the floor and walk the shoulder blades closer together. Bring your awareness first to your inner thighs, your inner edges of your feet. If you want to use the block between your knees, that might work more on kind of establishing that internal rotation. So that's squeezing the block between your knees. And then press inner edges of your feet down, puff your chest up towards your chin, and then lift your hips off the floor. So we've also been working on hamstring length. So let's add in a little hamstring strength by isometrically dragging your shoulders toward, or your heels towards your shoulders. At the same time, trying to lift your hips a little higher. So you might feel some activity on the back line of your body. Soften your throat, your jaw, your tongue. Take one more breath in. As you exhale, release. Release the block between your knees. Lift your knees above your hips. Take your hands to your thighs below your knees and just take one exhalation, pressing in. And then hug your knees towards your chest. If you want to rock a little side to side, that might feel good. Then cross your right leg over your left leg. And depending on your flexibility, you might take your feet to the floor, or you might grab the opposite edges of your feet with your hands. So that is more flexibility. Feet to the floor is less flexibility. Anywhere in between is fine. You can also grab your shins. Release the left foot to the floor. Shift your hips slightly to the left. Drop your knees to the right. Release the bind in the legs, come back to center. Cross your left leg over your right knee, maybe lifting your feet off the floor, maybe grabbing shins with the opposite hands, or maybe grabbing outer edges of your feet with hands. A little hip stretch. Release the feet. Right foot comes back to the floor. Lift the hips, shift the hips slightly to the right. Drop the knees to the left. Uncross your legs, bring both knees back to center. Shift to make sure you find an even amount of weight on your hips. Option to hug your knees, option to come straight into Shavasana. So legs long, arms down beside the body, palms facing up. Take a deep breath in, filling all the way up. One deep sigh out to exhale the breath out. And allow the breath to return to a natural state. Keeping your awareness on the rise and fall of the breath. There are many definitions of the word yoga, but probably the most commonly known definition of the word yoga is to yoke, which means to, you can stay down, which means to union or connection. So as we move through each of these practices, hopefully you're starting to find that connection of the mind, the body. As we get deeper into the breath, the connection of the breath, that true connection of finding yourself within all of that. So just kind of connect your mind to what you have brought awareness to. Your next inhalation, reach your arms over your head, extend through heels or toes. As you exhale, roll onto your side body. Take a moment here just to feel, just to observe. And when you're ready, use your hands and your arms to slowly press yourself up to a seated position, hands to heart center. Eyes closed, bow into the space of your heart, the space of the true self. That is the true purpose of yoga, to connect to the true self. And to each other, which is interesting virtually, but we manage. Thank you all. Namaste.
Namaste. Namaste.